Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of WWAA Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Mickelson, and for those of you not familiar with me, I am a romance book author and an advocate for causes such as cancer, autism, and lupus awareness. You can find my books on Amazon.com and other online retailers, and you can follow me on most social media platforms, including X.com at Christy Books. Tonight, I'm joined by two wonderful people, one of them being my co-host, Billy Dees. Billy, how are you?
I am doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show, Bill. And our special guest tonight is John DeNicola. John, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, Christy. How are you? How you doing,
I'm
Bill?
doing good.
Good.
You know, before we get into your interview, can you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more to our listeners? Tell us a little more about yourself.
Oh, gosh. Well, John DeNicola, musician, producer, songwriter. Probably should be songwriter first. I wrote the two hits from the movie Dirty Dancing. I've had the time of my life. Co-wrote. I've had the time of my life and Hungry Eyes. And I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I've been playing since I was 8. And I have a small record label, OMAD Records. I like to say small. Let's say boutique record label. And recently been putting out my own records as an artist, which I hadn't done my whole career. But I did started my first record. I did put out my first record in 2019. But on the record label, I have various artists. Probably like 8 or 10 artists on the label.
Wonderful. You know, I want to ask, because I love digging into the musician, the artist themselves, before I get into their actual like credits and stuff. How did you find a love for music? When did that start?
Jesus, that's a good question. It's ever since I was a little kid. I don't know. You know, we had the airwaves full. I was born in 1955, so the airwaves were full of pop tunes, and I can remember hearing "Pretty Woman" by Roy Orbison and going, "That's it. That's speaking to me." That sort of melancholy and cool guitar lick, and so I always wanted to play. I picked up a guitar when I was 8 years old, and I never had a doubt that I wanted to be a musician, not necessarily a songwriter, but a musician. I mean, it's just, I'm 12 in 1967, and there's Jimi Hendrix, there's the Beatles, there's Rolling Stones, there's Traffic, Steve Winwood and Traffic, there's Moby Grape, who I still work with some of the guys from that band. So it was just a great time for music.
Absolutely.
The industry hadn't figured out everything, and it wasn't corporate yet. It was what are the kids like? So that just drew me in.
Absolutely. You named off some wonderful music legends that I grew up listening to myself, and I agree with you. They had the sound, they had the beat, and everybody wanted to be like that. I used to go around my living room holding hairbrushes in my hand and singing and pretending I was like Lita Ford and all, Stevie Nicks, all of them. So yeah. I feel you 100%. Tell us a little bit about your writing process. When you're writing a song, how does it come together?
That's another good question. It has changed through the years. For me, I'm mostly on the music side and sometimes lyrical, but mostly on the music side. And, I'll just pick up a guitar or a keyboard and just ideas, melodies come into my head. And then I put them down, record the ideas, and build on those ideas. That through the years, I've really honed production skills, because as a songwriter, pop songwriter, you have to, it was no longer good to just be a piano vocal, guitar vocal demo. You had to have a demo that sounded like it could be on the radio. So for years I've honed that skill to make a good quote unquote demo. Nowadays I don't make demos anymore. I record records, which all those years of honing those skills enable me to. Now it's my process is sort of stream of consciousness. It's like there's so much music that I've listened to and built up in my computer brain, and now it just flows. It flows better than ever, actually, which is fun.
Absolutely. It sounds in a way kind of like what I do when I'm trying to write a book. I come in here and I just kind of jot down ideas, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, what would flow with this and what would flow with that? And it sounds like we do something quite similar, actually.
I'm sure this is a creative process. And, obviously you're doing the same thing I'm doing. And this is the beauty of the creative process is you're looking at a blank sheet. I'm looking at a blank staff, although I don't write music down, but you know what I'm saying? It's like you're creating something out of nothing, out of your brain, basically. And it's, that's these days with streaming and everything, it better be pleasing because the remuneration, is that the right word, is not the same as it was. It's, streaming that doesn't pay. So artists today have a hard time. I was lucky enough with the Dirty Dancing songs that they still are used in commercials and this, and it's a bit of a in the vernacular now. But if I had to rely on streaming, I mean, I can get, with my songs and my catalog, I can get 8 million streams in a quarter. So in 3 months, I can get 8 million streams. We're talking $500. You can't, a band so trying to start out who gets 100,000 streams. Hey, that's awesome. I got 100,000 people listening to my new song. It's $1. I mean, it's unsustainable. Right. I hope and think that something will change. It can't go like, people can't make, songwriters particularly, artists can make a little more because they're the artist, but songwriters it's not unsustainable.
Right.
Absolutely. Before we jump over to Billy and let him ask a few questions, I kind of want to touch on, you said, you've mentioned it a couple times, you've co-written the songs for Dirty Dancing, which is I've Had the Time of My Life, and Hungry Eyes. How did that get started? Like, how did you get into such a popular movie? Did it like hit you, or did you go and apply for that? Tell us about that. What happened there?
I'll tell you. I was writing with a guy named Frankie Previtt, my co-writer, basically, on those songs. I was working. Frankie was in a band called Frankie and the Knockouts, and they had a couple of top 20 hits, Sweetheart, which still gets played around Valentine's Day. But Frankie had gotten dropped by Jimmy Einer's label, Millennium. He got dropped because Jimmy was folding his record label. So Frankie was trying to write new songs for a new record. And a mutual friend of ours, David Prater, had a recording studio in New Jersey, Montclair, New Jersey. And I was recording music there. And Frankie was recording his stuff there, obviously different times. But David said, hey, you're looking for a co-writer, check out John. And he played him the music for what became Hungry Eyes. So if you just took the vocal off, Frankie heard that track. And so Frankie said, oh, I'd love to work on this. And he took it in what I guess they call it top line now. He took the track and he started writing, as you would write, lyrics. And so we had that song, and we'd written about 7 other songs. And during that time when I was working on stuff with Frankie, for Frankie and the Knockouts, Jimmy Einer called Frankie and said, listen, I'm working on this movie, Dirty Dancing, and they're looking for a song for the final scene. They're about to film it pretty soon. And so he described to Frankie that it's got to start slow, like the song from Flashdance, What a Feeling. He gave us like 3 songs to sort of reference. So I took those references and with a friend of mine, Donald Markowitz, who I was also working at the time, went to his studio and we wrote the music for the time of my life. We weren't chosen, like it wasn't our gig. We were submitting a song with everybody else in the world, as it was told, 150 songs, and they were all bummed. Patrick would tell us later, Patrick Swayze, that they were kind of, trying to like, oh, what are we going to do with this movie? They didn't have anything yet. They were dancing the final scene to a Lionel Richie temp song. And when our song came through, it was supposedly the 150th song they listened to, and they put it in the cassette, and everybody just went, this is the song. This is the song we're looking for. They all, jumped for joy because they were about to film the scene out of sequence. They were filming the closing sequence. And if you see Patrick mouthing the words in that scene, he's mouthing to our demo. They didn't even have the final yet. That was our demo. And so that's how we got. And then they needed another song for the scene where she brings the watermelons in. I Carried a Watermelon, which ended up being Love Man and these on. No, I can't think of the other one. But they brought us in for that scene. But we played them Hungry Eyes, which we had written. So the time of my life we wrote for the movie. Hungry Eyes we had written for Frankie. And when they heard Hungry, they said, well, I don't know if Hungry Eyes works for this scene, but we have another scene where I think it might work. And of course,
It did.
It's a famous scene.
Absolutely.
So it was basically, we came up with the song that they decided was the song for the end of the movie, and that has proven true too. I guess they were right.
Absolutely, because that is a very iconic scene seen all over the world as far as I know. I grew up watching the movie, and I used to sit there and pause on that certain area and everything because I wanted to be just like Jennifer Grey in that one scene right there. So everybody, I think, has heard that song, and very popular it was the Righteous Brothers, correct? They made it even more popular.
Actually, it was Bill Medley.
Bill Medley.
Was from the Righteous Brothers, and Jennifer Warnes was the female singer.
Thank you for correcting me.
Jennifer had a hit not so long before that with Joe Cocker, Love Lifts Us Up Where We Belong, from a movie. I can't remember. It was a military movie. I can't remember the name. Anyway, so that's where she started getting, pegged as a duet person, which at first she was a little hesitant because she didn't really want to do a pop song. And right. Bill was hesitant too. Frankie's demo, Frankie sang our demo with Rochelle Capelli, and Frankie was singing in the same range as Rochelle. So he was singing a tenor, and Bill's a baritone. So, Jimmy said, well, let's just bring it down an octave, which is what they did. And actually worked out well.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and pass to Bill for a moment because I know he's pretty good with these questions here. And every time we have a musician, he stumps me with some of his questions. So I love passing it to Bill and see what he can throw at us here. Go right ahead, Bill.
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to meet you, an accomplished person like yourself in your field. I always get just a little nervous, so I hope I don't ask anything real crazy. Oh. What I tried to do is I am very much an audiophile, and what I try to do is incorporate some of these questions from a creative aspect so that we don't bore the audience with a bunch of resistance-based questions or something like that.
Okay.
You first of all, you have a nice set of racks back there, and when I say that, that means something different than what you normally take from that question.
Right.
I notice a mix of contemporary equipment in there, and I see a lot of vintage-looking stuff. One of the reasons why I'm asking is someone who is my age or older. I've noticed if they've been in this business a long time, they incorporate digital applications and analog ones in a way that work together really well. Sometimes the more traditional producer, they don't like computers too much. And what happens with the younger folks is they're so reliant on computers. For example, they might have a plug-in for a compressor or a noise gate, but have never actually put their hands on one. So signal flow and all those things is something they don't quite understand. Clearly, digital has its advantages, especially for remixing, because in the old days, you would have to create another generation. You'd have to record from one tape to another. So there's a clear advantage there. But creatively, I think a lot of guys, in particular your peer group, really have an affinity for analog sounds, the warmth and the richness of them. So do you have a strategy for how you combine those things in your creative process?
Yes. I'm maybe cursed with the fact that I hear digital and it annoys me a little bit. I mean, if some people, and I'm talking accomplished musicians, will record a Hammond organ track with a digital plug-in organ, and I can't bear it. I can't take.
Right.
Now I have a Hammond up in the other room up there. I have, you can see behind me, a 16-track 2-inch tape machine. Most of the time, and you can see all this other stuff is digital. I'm sorry, analog. And, the advantage of, say, Pro Tools, which is a digital record, is the equivalent of the tape machine, the modern tape, but it's digital. And I'll record, and if say I'm doing a drum track, I use all the analog gear to get, so if the kick drum, the kick mic, the snare mic, the overheads, they're all through this beautiful analog gear, and it's recording into a multi-track digital format. So I'm getting the analog that I want. I'm getting the analog sound that I want, and I'm going digital. Now, you might say, well, why not just go to tape? First of all, I have a 16-track tape, and I'll tell you why I went with 16 instead of 24. But first of all, you need a lot of tape, right? If I'm going to do 10 songs, we're going to do a few takes of each song, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Pro Tools, with digital, I can do as many as I want, and I'm using a hard drive. It's nothing, and it's very editable in digital world in Pro Tools.
Right.
So you have the advantage of that. It's quicker. The recall is immediate. You don't have to keep twirling knobs to get it back to where you had it last session, and maybe you did another session, and so you twirled knobs again. Well, with digital, it comes up the way you last had it. So I also recently, this is getting maybe too technical for you, Christy, but there's when you go in analog and go to digital, you need a converter, what they call a converter. There are many converters out there. I recently purchased a company called Burl, B-U-R-L, and the difference sonically is immense. People will say, and I have friends of mine who are engineers, and people will say the Burl is the closest thing. It's still digital, but it's the closest thing to an analog tape sound. So I'm putting the through the analog units, preamps and stuff like that into the Burl, which maintains kind of that analog sound, and I'm putting it down on digital. A lot of the times after I do the drum tracks, I'll run it back through my tape machine to get a little
punch.
stack, and you can do that with guitars, you can do it with vocals. It depends on the song, and so it's a hybrid for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That I hear a lot of that. I just kind of wondered what you're taking on that. Just so I know, is that an Otari tape machine back there? Is that what that is?
But I use that purely. I have from the 50s huge EMT 140 reverb made in West Germany.
Yeah.
So before that was invented, you'd have to have a room where they set up mics. So it was a reverb room, right? Just to make something bounce and sound warm and reverby, echoey, delay. Well, this is the first unit that you no longer needed a room, but this is 4x8, so it's not like small, but it's a 4x8. It's a piece of metal that you send the signal to, and it reverberates out on the metal. But I use that machine mostly for that, to delay if I'm sending a vocal to it. I'll send it to that tape machine, and the tape head will delay the signal a bit so that the reverb comes back a little delayed.
Yeah.
So my voice, a little bit of space, and then the reverb delay, if I want that. Otherwise, I just go straight into the reverb.
That's interesting. I really love hearing this. That's amazing.
The other thing I do with it often is just run. If John Lennon famously he never liked to hear his voice by itself. He would always want to send it to a tape machine for a slap back delay, kind of, instant karma sound. So that's the other thing I use that for. If I've recorded a vocal, I'll send it to there, and I'll bring it back into the digital Pro Tools, and it'll sound like a slap.
Yeah, that's really cool stuff. I hear more and more.
You can do that with a plug-in.
Yes. Right.
To my ear, it doesn't sound the same. This sounds better to me.
Yeah.
I could also use a plug-in reverb that's modeling my reverb unit, right? It is an EMT plug-in, but it's just not the same. It's analog. So analog is the whole full spectrum. I always say this when it comes to LPs versus CDs versus MP3s. A CD is enough samples of the sound to fool our ears to think we're hearing the whole spectrum. Analog tape or analog is the whole spectrum. So it doesn't have to fool us. That's why it sounds warmer and more pleasing. I have a theory, and I found a few articles, although I can't find them again, but people still love records that were made in the 60s and 70s. Now, all those, the Who, the Beatles, Rolling Stones, they were all made analog, right? On tape. And I've read somewhere that analog imprints on our brains better than digital does. And that's why people are still drawn. You still get 17-year-olds that want to hear the Who.
Yes.
Because even though they may be listening to it digitally through Spotify, but it was originally recorded with analog. So that's the theory.
Yes, that's the theory. And here again, I hope all the audience, in terms of the creative process, recognizes this as really, really cool, because that has really evolved. And what I was getting at with, you're only a little bit older than I am, our generation, we understood how things worked in terms of electronics, in terms of signal flow and all these other things. And we incorporated digital into it. And I think a lot of times it's kind of like driving an automatic transmission and never having driven a manual. you don't run the car the same, not knowing what the car's doing underneath the floor. And when you have that knowledge, in my opinion, you're a much better technician and a much better creator. So that's why somebody like you, who's a lot more experienced than I am, I really wanted to hear your feedback on that.
Yeah.
I'll ask one more question related to technology, but this is more from an artisan. We hear a lot now about AI. And, in Hollywood, there's a lot of people who are worried about the function of actors, the function of writers, and things like that. I happen to believe that I think the creative process, when done well, is always going to be better human. I think the way to convey human emotions is probably always going to be better by human beings. But there is going to be an infiltration of these systems that will listen to thousands of songs, pick the best bridges, pick the best harmonies, pick the best this and that, and try to incorporate something that uses all those things to make a pleasant song. What do you think the future of that is going to be?
Well, I like to think that the humanity, the human touch to it, is always going to be what we want to hear and see and read. I don't think, it's early, I guess. AIs probably can still develop, but I don't see it. Honestly, don't see it. I just don't see it replacing people, musically, film wise. I guess it can help. I just used something recent. I just put out a record. I'll try and tell this quickly. On my record label, Bob Mosley was one of the guys in Moby Grape. Moby Grape was a band from the 60s San Francisco scene. And Bob has had a lot of hard times, whatever, but he had a record that went out in 1971 on Warner Brothers after the Moby Grape. Moby Grape was almost famous, let's put it, but they influenced everybody from the Led Zeppelin to Bruce Springsteen to Chrissie Hynde to Beck and just many people.
Mm-hmm.
But Bob's record came and went. I became friends with Peter Lewis from the band, and I did 2 records with him. But Bob, I wanted to reissue his record because it never really got what it needed. But it had a kind of a low end that was missing on the drums and the bass. The drums and bass were not loud enough, in my opinion. And I was able to, with AI, separate the drums and the bass. These are stripes, the stems, right? All the drums, all the bass, all the vocals, and everything in the middle you can't really separate. So if there's horns or pianos or guitars, they're all in one spot. But I was able to pull the drums and bass separately and just bring them up in volume. So I used AI to separate and just, the stuff was there. I didn't change it. I just brought it up because I should explain. Nobody could find the original multi-track master. Otherwise, I would have done it that way.
Sure.
But the way it was, just a 2-track CD, I had to split that out. So, that's AI helping. It's able to discern where the drums were and where the vocals were. And I was able to, and all the reviews have said, wow, that's much better than the original. Now, I wouldn't do that on too many things, but this is one where it really worked.
Great. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much. I'll give you back to Christy.
Well, thank you, Bill. Actually, I was kind of getting into that conversation there because I personally am not a fan of using AI to write material, but I do see the help it can be to make it better and everything. So I kind of see what you guys are saying, and I'm still learning about AI. So it's always nice to hear other people's opinions about that. So thank you for sharing that part.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you a couple of other little questions here. What has been your most rewarding part of your career?
Well, I have to go with the Dirty Dancing phenomenon, and to have your songs in a movie and that influence so many people all over the world. That's pretty awesome. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's a once in a lifetime situation. We won the Oscar for Time of My Life. So that, second to that is putting my own records out after all these years in the business. I always was writing for somebody else. What would this person want to sing, or how can I get somebody to cover the song I've written, so for their new record. But now it's like I'm unshackled. I can do whatever I want. I can put my ideas forward, and that has felt. I'm working on my third record right now. So I put two records out.
Amazing.
One is the Why Because, and one is She Said. Why Because 2019, She Said 2021, and I'm working on the third record. I'm almost done. So that's my second favorite thing that I've done.
Well, I tip my hat to you, because I like to sing in the shower. I like to sing it. When I was younger, I used to do show choir and all that, but I don't have the gift that you guys have. You as musicians have a wonderful gift, whether you're writing music or singing music. It still takes talent, and that's something I just don't have in the music department there. But I tip my hat to you for everything that you do.
I certainly couldn't write a book, so
I think we're about equal then. Everything. What has been your struggles from the time you started to now? What has been the toughest struggle you've come up across?
Well, the industry is, and it's gotten worse. The industry is very difficult to maneuver within, unless you're very, what's the word? You have to. I won't say thin-skinned. I wasn't enough of a force to get in there. Listen to this song. You got to record this song. We got very lucky. We had two great songs for Dirty Dancing, and after that, it's I wrote with John Waite, and I've written with Eddie Money. A lot of different people, but it's a tough industry, and like I said, it's worse now because they don't want to develop anything. They want things to be developed, and then they'll pick it up and take it to the next level. So I would say just trying to maneuver within the A&R, or A&R is artist and repertoire. They're the ones that look for songs, to be able to maneuver within that. I don't bother with it anymore. Now I just put out my own records, and artists on my record label. I just put out my own records. I don't try to sell songs anymore. But while I was trying, it was, even with those songs under my belt, it was still difficult to, we were independent. We never signed with Sony Publishing or Warner Chappell, so we were always independent. And so it's always hard as an independent. I didn't want to give up. We were lucky to maintain our publishing for those songs, and if I was going to join Warner Brothers or Sony, I'd have to probably share those songs. I'm like, why? I don't. Why do that? So that was a little difficult on being on the out. I was call it outside indie.
Indie.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I feel you. I am indie, everything. So everything that I do is independent, and I have to fight for my spots. I have to fight to get, where I want to be in this business. So I tip my hat to you. It's a hard, long road for those that don't know. It's a lot of struggles out there, and I really tip my hat to you.
Yep.
What would you tell people that are trying to get into the music business? What is your main piece of advice?
Oh, it just, if you're wanting to get into the music business, it's because you have a love of music. So I don't know if I have to tell you anything. You know what I mean? You're gonna do it because you like the way it feels to write a song or to perform on an instrument or whatever. So my advice is just go full steam ahead. Just don't listen to listen to good advice. Don't be discouraged. And like I said, if you're wanting to do it, it's because it's in you to do it. And don't ignore that. Just go for it. Just go until you're satisfied.
That's wonderful advice, and I thank you for giving our listeners that. Now, let me ask you one more before I pass back to Bill really quick.
Yeah.
Some people in the music industry, the writing books industry, podcasting, anything that you're out in front of the public or that you do for the public, sometimes you get a lot of stress and a lot of pressures from the public. How has that affected you? Like, I personally have gone through a lot of stress because people see the way my looks change over the years, and that causes some mental stress and everything. How does it affect you in the music business?
Well, being a songwriter, you are kind of behind the scenes, so I'm not affected as much. I've never really felt any pressure. I guess I felt pressure to write songs as big as those, which is kind of impossible. So I've kind of made peace with that. I mean, I guess I could have gotten, another song that would, I mean, Time of My Life is ASCAP's number 15 most played songs of all time. So it's hard to do that again. I think I've written many songs that are as good as, if not better than those songs. But sometimes it's context. It was in that scene, it was in that movie, and that's what made it. The Hungry Eyes probably wouldn't have been a giant hit had it not been that scene in the movie. So I don't know. It's a good question. I in some ways I kind of just shoved that down, inside, and moved forward as best as I could. And like I said, those songs enabled me to stay in the business for sure. And they also enabled me to have this recording studio and have this record label, OMAD Records, OMAD Records. And I'm thankful for that. And I don't feel pressure with that because it's everything I want to do. So there's no pressure on me for that.
Thank you so much for your answer. Bill, do you have any final thoughts before we start closing down?
Sure. I promise I won't nerd everybody out this time. I haven't had the experience on the level of someone like you, but I've done, voiceovers for commercials, things like that. And I'll be in a store or something. I'll have the radio on, and I'll hear my voice come out of the speakers. And I sometimes will look around to see if the reaction, if it caught people's attention, if whatever. And I can understand what must have happened when that movie came out, because you had something that was obviously created by yourself, and I know you collaborated, but nonetheless, it was your efforts that created something. And the effect on the audience was much more profound. People will often recall, like you said, not only the movie, but that time in their life, that when they were in college and that movie came out, or they had just gotten married and that movie came out. And those those memories, the reaction to your work has become interwoven into people's lives. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you feel a responsibility, let's say, to the audience in that case?
I don't feel a responsibility. I feel nothing but I'm just thankful. I'm happy that people related to that movie and those songs. I'm really thankful that it's around the globe. I mean, it's everywhere. People know that song. It's a great feeling. It has, I mean, it's always been a great feeling. In a way, it's gone beyond that now because it's in the vernacular of American culture. I mean, the amount of times you'll see a reference to Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner, or people can also put the name Dirty Dancing and Time of My Life are almost interchangeable. Like, oh, did you see Time of My Life? Did you hear that song Dirty Dancing? So I'm just thankful that it resonated. I'm particularly thankful that it still resonates, which is ludicrous, really. But I mean, we're constantly fielding commercial inquiries all the time, and that's all over the world too.
Yeah.
So I'm just thankful and grateful that people it resonated with people. My good friend Eleanor Bergstein wrote the movie, and we're close friends, and I'm so happy that she wrote that movie, and she's actually writing a treatment of it for a play, and the play has been all over the world also, but she's doing a kind of a deeper dive into a play for it's going to be called Dirty Dancing the Musical, and they're shooting for Broadway, and it's she'll tell stories of how during war, like in Kosovo, and people were hunkered down, and they were watching the Dirty Dancing down there until the war was over. It got them through, those kind of stories. So, we're all lucky to have been part of this phenomenon, and really,
yeah.
Emil Ardolino, who directed the movie, he has passed on, but he said it was just one of those the moon and the stars just lining up, and taking on a life of its own, and that's true. It was a small film company, very small film company, and here we are still talking about it.
Yeah, there's few works like that go on from one generation to another generation like that. I mean, there's a few exceptions. Grease would be one, but they very rarely do. It's always the children that say, "Oh, that's my mom and dad's music. I don't want nothing to do with it." But that has held on.
Yeah, it really has. Yeah, no,
it absolutely has.
You get like an 80-year-old and a 12-year-old still loving it.
Yes. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that's one case where the internet has helped because a lot of times with music today, and I'm not saying anything bad about music today because everybody does that, but it's very synthetic in a lot of ways. And getting back to, I know a lot of my friends are audiophiles. They say it's not so much that, people don't like the technology so much, but they like the fact that records sound better because the music was better, and there's a certain aspect of that. I think that, what you were talking about with analog there, a guitar is always going to sound like a guitar. Piano is always going to sound like a piano. Vocals are always going to sound like vocals. And when you insert things into your recordings that you can barely pronounce, that are some sort of software, and I think when you rely on the technology of the time, And the 80s, we had that a little bit with the synthesizers and the electronic drums. You can instantly recognize an 80s song. When you rely on that too much, it dates it. But one thing nice about analog, getting back to our discussion earlier, real sounds are always going to be real sounds.
Right.
And I don't know if you want to speak to that anymore, but that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. And you do things with real sounds that are absolutely wonderful. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really quick, are you currently working on any new projects?
As I said, I'm working on another record of my own. I'm working on Robert LaRoche, who was in a band called The Size in the 90s. And this is our second record today, also coming out on OMAD Records. We just put out this past holiday season our Christmas record, and which was with everybody on the label. And let's see if I can grab it. Make a joyful noise. So
wonderful.
We got that LP, and this is season greetings from OMAD's Records, and it's everybody that's on the label, which was a ton of fun to do. Obviously, we had to start it about this time last year to get it out in time for Christmas, and that was fun. So the Robert LaRoche record, my record, I'm working on some songs with Peter Lewis, all from Moby Grape, whose mother, by the way, was Loretta Young.
Oh,
yeah. And his daughter, Arwen, came to him at age 22 after college and said, I want to learn how to play guitar and write songs. And we're actually, OMAD Records is doing a documentary. I don't know what you call it. I guess it's a documentary. It's called Fall on You. And it's basically, Peter was raised by Loretta Young in Hollywood, and he had a very difficult upbringing and difficult with Moby Grape. And Moby Grape is a story that deserves a documentary on its own, but there was all kinds of mishaps and things. And so when his daughter came to him and said, I want to learn this, he was like, oh my God, am I passing a curse on to her now? And so that's really what the documentary is about. And it's really just becomes a father-daughter beautiful story. It's I defy anyone to not get their handkerchief out at the end just because of the beauty of a family, father-daughter relationship. So that we're doing that. We're just getting that to be the final edits. And I'm also working with my niece, who is 24 years old. She's coming next month, and we're going to track some songs. And so we're busy.
Well, it sounds wonderful. And I actually look forward to hearing some more about that docuseries, actually. So
Yes.
Anytime you have updates about it, please jump on
Sure.
and let me know.
Sure.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you one final question before we wrap it up here.
Okay.
If you can tell our listeners one thing about you, from you, like deep down from your heart, what would your message be to the listeners?
I think I kind of touched on it already. Is just trust your creative spirit and go with your instincts and trust your instincts, and of course learn the tools you need to get what you want to get. I mostly I'd say just go forward with your instincts, and that's my best advice. I don't know if that was the question, but that
Actually, it was a wonderful answer, and I thank you for leaving our audience with that.
Yeah.
I do want to ask, where can people find you online? Like, how can people get in contact with you? Like, what if they want to learn more about you? Where can they find more information?
Well, omadrecords.com, omadrecords.com,
Okay.
or johndinicola.com. And then, with Instagram, it's John DiNicola Music or OMAD Records. Same with Facebook. You can find me on all those, John DiNicola Music or OMAD Records. You can find on all the socials.
Wonderful. And really quick, Billy, where could people find you online?
Well, I guess my social media home is on the former Twitter, which is now X, real easy to find at Billy D's. You can find the Billy D's podcast anywhere you find podcasts. We have about a 10-year history. So anywhere you are at in terms of your favorite app, just search me out and I'll be there. Thank you.
Thank you. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, you can find me on x.com at Christy Books, and you can find me on Facebook and all social media platforms, or you could just do a Google search. I am there. The WWAA podcast is on all podcast platforms, and you can check us out there. And also, I'm going to plug my own stuff here for one little second. Ladies and gentlemen, September 13th of 2025, in Woodbridge, New Jersey, 665 Rahway Avenue, Woodbridge, New Jersey. We are holding a little fundraiser for suicide awareness and prevention. We are going to have live music, food, dancing, an auction. Come on down. Help us raise some funds for the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention if you're in the area. We'd love to see you, and it's for a great cause. So come on down. Like I said, I'd love to see you. Billy will be there. He's our MC for the night. I'll be there doing some book signings and just hanging out and kind of running everything and seeing what trouble I could get into, because Lord knows I love to get into trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking to John DiNicola, wonderful musician, wonderful person. Check him out online. You all would know him from the songs I've Had the Time of My Life and Hungry Eyes. I believe Eric Carmen was the main singer on that one, but John has helped co-write that song. Those are from the movie Dirty Dancing. Check it out. And once again, I'm going to say, if you can dream it, you can achieve it. Until next week, everybody, I'll be talking to you all again real soon. Good night, everyone.